Here is a question that should keep every American up at night. What happens when the man who promised to expose the most powerful secret in Washington turns out to be the one hiding it? Because that is exactly what we are watching unfold right now with the Epstein files. Donald Trump stood on campaign stages and told the American people he had no problem releasing everything. He signed a law, his own law, ordering his Justice Department to make every Epstein document public within 30 days. His base went wild. His allies celebrated. Kash Patel, the new FBI director, had spent years pointing at the Epstein files as proof of deep state corruption. And then the deadline came. And they released less than 1%. What you just saw was the official announcement. The DOJ standing at a podium saying they had released 3 million pages and fulfilled the law. But that moment came more than a month after the legal deadline. And by then, the story had already started to crack open in ways that could not be put back. Stay with me, because the numbers, the timeline, and what Congress found inside those files will shock you. Let's go back to November 19, 2025. Trump signs the Epstein Files Transparency Act into law. The law is clear. The Department of Justice has 30 days until December 19 to release every federal record related to the investigation of Jeffrey Epstein. There are limited exceptions. You can redact the names of victims, and you can withhold anything that genuinely threatens national security. But powerful names, embarrassing connections, politically inconvenient documents, the law explicitly says those cannot be shielded. Trump's base treated this as the moment the swamp would finally be drained. Kash Patel had built much of his public persona around the idea that the Epstein files were being hidden by corrupt insiders. He was now the FBI director. He was the one in charge of making sure this happened. December 19 arrived. The deadline passed, and a court filing in early January revealed the truth. The Department of Justice had released just 125,575 pages out of millions, less than 1%. That clip lays bare what the initial release actually looked like. About 40,000 of those pages were described by reporters as nearly unreadable. So heavily redacted, they were basically black rectangles. Democrats immediately called the administration lawless. But even some Trump supporters were starting to ask the same question. What exactly are they hiding? Then came the big moment. January 30, 2026. The DOJ held a press conference. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche stood before cameras and announced that the department was releasing more than 3 million additional pages, over 2,000 videos, and 180,000 images. He said, and I want you to remember this exact phrase, "Today's release marks the end of a very comprehensive document identification and review process to ensure transparency to the American people." The end. Done. Finished. That was their message. But within days, reporters and advocates started reading what was actually in those files. And that is when things went from embarrassing to outrageous. Because here is what the DOJ did not tell you at that press conference. Mixed into those 3 million pages were fabricated documents, fake submissions. The DOJ's own press release admitted, in plain English, that the production may include fake or falsely submitted images, documents, or videos, as everything that was sent to the FBI by the public was included. They published millions of pages of material and warned you up front that some of it was not real. They told you not to trust their own release. Think about what that means. The federal government just handed the American public the single largest document dump in recent memory, and simultaneously told us it contained garbage, not verified records, not authenticated evidence, just everything that anyone had ever mailed to the FBI, mixed in together, with no way for the average person to know what was real. NPR's reporters put it plainly. The government was essentially saying the files it released were not reliable. But the chaos did not stop there, because within days of that massive release, attorneys representing Epstein survivors began screaming. The documents that had just been posted publicly, all 3 million pages of them, included the names and faces of victims, real people, people who had been sexually abused, their email addresses, their personal details, their explicit images, posted online for the entire world to see. The Department of Justice had to take down thousands of documents from its own website after survivors' lawyers raised the alarm. Officials later admitted that roughly 0.1% of the pages contained unredacted identifying information about victims. That sounds small, but 0.1% of 3 million pages is still 3,000 pages. 3,000 pages that exposed real survivors, women and girls, to public humiliation, harassment, and re-traumatization. One survivor's attorney called it outrageous. And they were right. Now here is where the story turns into something truly difficult to explain away. While victims' names and faces were going up on the internet, while real people were being exposed and re-victimized, lawmakers who got access to the unredacted versions of certain key sections found something very different on the other side of those redactions. About 20 individuals, high-profile names, completely redacted in the public version, protected, hidden, with Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell the only visible names left in those sections. So the government exposed the victims and protected the powerful. Members of Congress were furious, and they said so publicly. Survivors stood at congressional hearings. Jamie Raskin, the House Judiciary ranking member, went to a government facility and reviewed the unredacted files himself. When he came out, he told reporters he found tons of completely unnecessary redactions, while victim information had leaked everywhere. He accused the Justice Department of being in cover-up mode and violating the law. Attorney General Pam Bondi sat at the witness table with Epstein survivors standing directly behind her. A lawmaker pointed to the women and said, "Those are just some of the hundreds of survivors of Jeffrey Epstein's global sex trafficking ring who are demanding that the truth be told." Bondi defended her handling of the files. She said she had spent her entire career fighting for victims. The hearing turned into a shouting match, and the questions kept mounting. Because while all of this was happening, the chaotic dump, the victim exposure, the redacted elites, NPR was quietly working on something that would make all of it worse. On February 24, 2026, NPR published an investigation that changed the entire story. Their reporters found that the Department of Justice had withheld portions of the Epstein files, not just delayed, not just redacted, withheld, deliberately removed from the public release. And what was in those missing pages? Allegations that President Donald Trump sexually abused a minor, specifically at least 50 pages containing FBI interview summaries from a woman who described being brought by Epstein to meet Trump when she was between 13 and 15 years old. She detailed, in graphic terms, what she says happened. The FBI interviewed her 4 times. Investigators who spoke to her found her credible. And then those records were left out of the release that the government said was complete. PBS NewsHour covered the story the same evening. Their justice correspondent Ali Rogan explained the documents included summaries of 3 separate FBI interviews with this accuser. She alleged Epstein brought her to Trump. She described what she says Trump did to her. The White House denied the allegations, but the pages existed. They were known to investigators, and they were not in the public release that the DOJ had called the end of the process. Democrats on the House Oversight Committee called it a potential crime. They opened an investigation. Now, let me be clear about something important. These are allegations. They are unverified. The White House denied them. And nothing in this video is a verdict on what happened. What is not in dispute is this. The Department of Justice was legally required to release those pages under the very law Trump signed. The law says records cannot be withheld to protect powerful people from embarrassment. And those pages were not in the release. That is the documented fact. Go back to September 2024. Trump is sitting with podcaster Lex Fridman. Fridman asks about releasing the Epstein files and the client list. Trump says, "I'd be inclined to do the Epstein. I'd have no problem with it." 2 months earlier on Fox and Friends, he was asked directly, "Would you declassify the Epstein files?" He said, "Yeah, I would." His campaign account posted that clip to social media with the caption, "President Trump says he will declassify the Epstein files." His allies, including Kash Patel, built entire political brands around the idea that they would blow the lid off the Epstein network. And then he became president. He signed the transparency law. The deadline passed, and they released less than 1%. The big dump came, filled with fabricated documents and victim information. The redactions protected powerful names, and then they quietly left out the pages about him. By February 2026, Trump had a new message for America about the Epstein files. He told the country to move on. His Justice Department said the review was over. He called the entire controversy a Democrat hoax that never ends. What a difference a signature makes. And where is Kash Patel in all of this? He is the FBI director. He is the man who oversees the bureau that conducted those interviews with Epstein's accusers. He is the face of federal law enforcement during the period when the biggest transparency promise in recent history was made, broken, and then covered up, while victims were being re-exposed online, while Congress was screaming, while the pages about the president were being kept out of the public record. Kash Patel was busy doing something else entirely. He was suing journalists. That is the reality of the system right now. The FBI director who campaigned on transparency is in court fighting reporters. The attorney general who spent her career fighting for victims sat at a witness table with those same victims standing behind her, demanding accountability she has not delivered. The president who promised to release everything is now calling it a hoax. Here is the part of this story that affects every single American, not just the survivors, not just the political class. When a law passes with near unanimous support in Congress, when the president signs it, when the whole country is told, this time we will get the truth, and then the government misses its own deadline, dumps fabricated documents, exposes victims by accident, protects powerful men on purpose, and quietly withholds the pages that mention the president himself. What does that tell you about what transparency laws are actually worth? It tells you they are worth exactly as much as the people in power want them to be worth. Not a page more. The Epstein files were supposed to prove that no one is above the law. Instead, they proved exactly the opposite. The victims got exposed, the powerful got protected, and the pages about the president went missing. That is not a Democrat story. That is not a Republican story. That is the story of a system that still in 2026 decides whose secrets to keep and whose lives to put online. Everything you heard in this video is based on public reporting from PBS NewsHour, NPR, BBC News, The Guardian, and official Department of Justice press releases. I have shown you the clips. I have given you the numbers. I encourage you to read the original sources yourself and form your own conclusions. The question I want you to sit with is this: if this law could not produce the truth, what law ever will? If you believe Americans deserve real answers, not a dump, not a hoax, not a cover-up, hit like, subscribe, and tell me in the comments, do you think the full Epstein files will ever be released? And do you think it matters who is in the White House when they do it? I'll see you in the next one.